Hello, and welcome back to Sharing a Chapter a Day. This is Do, Ra, Me, and today I will be reading Chapter 3 of Engagement in Peril by Dara, Odoe, Sok. Chapter 3 Birth of Chaos. In steady, sharp pain accompanied with deep, shallow breathing, I began to ponder about my past mistakes and regrets. It was then, during that mid-humid 1970s, several wars from neighboring countries, Vietnam and various factions, and the Khmer Rouge uprising against their own people ruined our small makeshift bamboo home in the jungle village of Peril, Cambodia. Situated in the commune of Peril in the Ek Phnom district in the province of Battambang, Bang, located in the northwestern territory of Cambodia. There, the second child of two adolescent adults was conceived under the watchful eyes of the many gods that these partially clothed natives worshipped. In a world full of stars and with equivalent exchange and with well-to-do future and outcome, it is an ever-demanding possibility. This was how my name and the meaning of Dara, Rado, Dora, Odoe, Sok came to be. This was where I was conceived by my pre-adult parents and born on the year of the cursed dragon, 1976, the same sign that my father once held. This tiny infant was born into an early life of war, torture, torment, and constant fleeing. I am the dragon's first and only son. And some have blamed my birth for my father's death and his undoing. And growing up with that black mark on your mind was quite hard, where you constantly question yourself about what it all means and at times cause you to lose yourself in its irrelevant truth. Now, Dara's lineage is quite short. All but one of his grandparents on his mother's side have all passed and reincarnated as someone or something else before he was even born. My mother's fellow townspeople and his native, the people were amongst the serene jungle of Kampuchea, near and far, are inhumanely forced to flee from their home to seek freedom from the atrocity that draws near. And the few who stayed behind were killed and made example of by the angry Khmer Rouge of Cambodia, where their tormented bodies are left behind for birds of prey and their decaying carcasses left for the wild to pick at, devour, and feast upon. Dara had it quite bad then, born into such turmoil and atrocity. I don't pray for this sort of life for anyone, as you will see what type of shit Dara had been through as you continue to read onward. My mother's family, the Sok and Ross family, and her lineage had packed what they could and readied themselves to separate and break all ties from their home and country. One by one, alongside each other, they ventured off into neighboring villages, communes, towns, and countries, for we all had to run in various directions, mainly just the immediate family stuck together. A few or so per group. We had to hurry and scatter all about if we were to escape the forthcoming horrendous outcome that will eventually take place in our village, town, and communes. During that horrific chaotic time, early during our escape toward freedom, it was just my mother, her sister, her younger brother, and several of her other kins and I were running together from our captors. Mother, tiny as she is, with me in her arms and on her back, carefully ran throughout the night alongside her sibling, praying to her ancestor and determined never to be captured by our communistic counterpart, She and the other trudged and struggled their way through pitch-dark jungle, mine-filled terrains, and disease-infested rivers where they crawled in, over, and through waist-deep blood-filled streams and ponds and over decaying bodies of her fellow natives and butchered citizens. During this trying time, about 9 months earlier, before we left our rural home in Peril, my sister, Sotere, was abducted and taken away by the Khmer Rouge. They roam about the land and countryside and snatch children who were able to walk and able to work away from their home and from the comfort and warm bosoms of their mother and family, and force these unfortunate miners to labor upon their rice paddy and leech-infested knee-high vegetable and rice swamps. I'm sure my sister had it extremely tough then, being forced to work at such a young age and fed on nothing but bits and crumbs. Her innocence and her purity taken away at such a young age. I know she had suffered more than I could have imagined. For during that time, I was a mere infant, and fortunately lucked out from being taken away by those horrendous, horrific bastards. Where was my father during this time? Well, death has taken him away a month earlier. Shortly after my sister was stolen savagely from my mom's arms by the Khmer Rouge, the tentative story goes, so I was told. Before leaving my mom and her sibling, my father wanted to make one more try to find his only daughter and get her back away from the corrupt hands of the Khmer Rouge. So he decided to go north, off and ventured on his own to look for his beloved daughter, where he left my mother and me behind in the security of his kin and her siblings. My Uncle Dang had advised him to go south instead of going north to look for my sister, since the majority of the Khmer Rouge were said to be situated there in the south. But my father was stubborn and decided to venture north instead, believing and wishfully hoping that he was right to go north. So while on his way north to find my sister, walking many horrendous miles, he was then stricken with death. It happened that he was stricken with pneumonia of sort and died as a result of his extreme illness. I was told by my mother's little brother many years later, when I was an adult, that my father had died in the arms of his brother-in-law at the home of a close family friend in the northern part of Cambodia. On the night of my father's death, my mother's grandmother, had dreamed of my father's dreadful fate. She had mentioned that in her dream or premonition, my father had come to her asking for food and beverages, starving to death, and that he was saying his goodbye to his mother. My mother also had an eerie feeling about her husband's situation then. She sort of sensed that my father wasn't coming back to be with his wife, daughter, and son, and that going out to look for my sister up north would be the death of him. She had that thought to herself. Although she wished that it wasn't true, but then again, that too will come to pass. Several months later, after my father had gone north, my mother was told of her husband's death by word of mouth by passerby and such, who heard of my father's death from the north. She was told of my father's burial location and such, and once his body was burnt to a crisp. There was no traditional ceremony of cremation and celebration of life for my father then, because of what was going on during that time. Monks were never called upon to give chants and blessing to the departed and his family, and there was no town's parade of his lifeless body around the area to show that he had passed and that he would be ascending or reincarnating to something better. His body was simply burnt atop a makeshift campfire and his bone collected afterward for burial. There I was, a mere infant who is now fatherless, with an abducted sister, and with only my petite mother's warmth and loving embrace to comfort me then. But our family all stood steadfast and struggled onward away from the atrocity that ravaged on in and about our tiny, irrelevant homeland then. During our escapade, Mother would hide and nurse me only when she felt that it was safe. She and her family were always on the alert and constantly praying to their ancestors to guide them. My mother, Hong, her older sister, with several of her kids, Dang, my mom's little brother, my mom's mother, and several other family members ran through the minefield terrain, disease-infested swamp, haunted forests, and uncharted jungles. They hid beneath the canopies of trees and leaves. Inside barks and behind branches they hid. They crept slowly and meticulously, made their way through the unforgiving jungle and the horrendous mountainside. I can't imagine that the real hell could be compared to this dark, bleak world that she and the other were struggling through during that chaotic time. The loneliness, the hardship, the anguish, the thoughts of being a young widow, a stolen child, and the reality of taking care of a young malnourished infant during a time of turmoil and chaos must have placed much burden on my mom's tiny body and put much strain on her delicate, fragile shoulders. Mother could have thrown me away like the many infants who were born then during that time. But she didn't. She didn't want to give up another child, and she'd rather suffer, struggling trying to give me a better life than never trying at all. She couldn't bear to give up her last chance of hope. Well, that's what she often told me while I was growing up during my youth. The fields, the killing fields of Cambodia, are spoiled with landmines and hidden traps that could torment, abuse, incapacitate, maim, and kill those who are destined to step into and upon them. Spooks and mischievous spirits would tempt Mother and her kins to go in their direction. In their native tongue of Khmer, follow us, they say. We will guide you to safety. Mother, being a clever and spiritual person, never fell for any of their trickery, foolery, and she was never manipulated by these evil lost souls. Mother had her own beliefs and personal spirit to watch over her, for she would pray and pray for guidance from her ancestor and upon her gods and saints to watch over her family and mainly to watch over her only boy, the dragon's son. I, very tiny in stature, but mindful, always tired and hungry, like a baby chimp, clutched upon my mother's shoulder and bosom, while she ran with me upon her back and shoulder throughout the bleak, desolate, and haunting nights. She and the other would take short breaks to nap and regenerate. Mother would console, fed, and comfort me with words of kindness, wisdom, and stories of a perfect world, where there was no war, no atrocity committed upon each other, a utopian society that she seeked for me and the others. At various times throughout the day, she would question me if I was tired or hungry. I, without hesitation, mindless of my and our dire situation, would eagerly reply that I would always be tired and hungry, although Mother seemed to be the only one doing all the running and carrying. She sometimes tell me that story now and then to friends and family, and when she reminisces about the old times during that time, it brings keen sharpness to her speech. Her eyes fill up with salty tears, and a moment of sadness upon her withered face was exposed. She usually smiled and giggled about how I would complain about everything when I was an ignorant infant. Months later, still running, heading south and hiding out in the hollows of trees, ditches, eating and nourishing me with what she could find off the ground and from various plants and flowers, my mother's younger brother, Dang, decided to go off on his own, to go on ahead, to go south, to look for my sister, Soteri, with my mother and the other family member carefully following behind him. Uncle Dang headed south. He was only about 12 years old then, a mere teenager who has been forced into a manhood at an early age and has to take on the responsibility of protecting his mother, sisters, nephew, and the rest of his family who were struggling alongside him. During this troubling time, the terrible, humid summer of 1979, and the Khmer Rouge were disbanding and making their way to the countryside. My uncle bravely went up to several of these evildoers to inquire of his missing niece. He told them of her name and feature, but none knew or simply didn't care or give a shit about what he was asking. Uncle Dang was lucky then that he didn't get shot down. We were all lucky that they didn't shoot all of us down like wild dogs. So we continued on, and we followed. With sheer determination, he bravely continued on, hoping and seeking to find his young niece for his sorrowful older sister. After many trials and much frustration from begging and questioning passerby, strangers, and the Khmer Rouge soldiers, he was the first to run into a group of bald, toothless, and malnourished children in a battered rice field. These innocent beings were covered in mud from the neck to toe, where the condition was swamp-like and disease-infested, where illness and senseless death ran rampant amongst the one who dwelled there. These children that my mother and the others saw resembled that of the walking dead, the untouchables, their stomach sunken, their physique skeletal-like, mainly of bone, covered with a thin layer of muddy, ashy brown skin. While running from this atrocity, Mother never gave up hope, only wishful that she would one day be reunited with her only daughter, who was taken away from her months earlier. Here she stood, frozen to the decaying earth, her eyes locked upon those children, and among these innocent, tiny, starving creatures, who were captive and imprisoned by the Khmer Rouge, they no longer resemble human beings, more like naked, fragile, unrecognizable creatures. A bald, hollowed, sunken, black-eyed, muddy, pale-skinned little girl approached my mother and grabbed her left hand and assured Mother that she was her missing child, Soteri. Soteri? In quivering, shallow breath, Mother uttered and questioned. With little reluctance, but more hopeful tears and with uncontrollable joy, tears and weeping began to trickle up her throat and down and drown her dry, sorrowful eyes as a young child, lost for word, shook her head up and down to assure my mother that it was her, Soteri. With her arms wide open, welcoming my lonesome sister back into her arms, Mom wept joyfully. Her sibling and the other also wept. And I'm sure I wept as well, although I knew nothing of what was going on during my pre-adolescent stage. Joyful tears of being reunited with our missing daughter, niece, and sister was heard all around. I have no idea how Mom got my sister back. I'm sure she begged and pleaded with the horrible communists. She and the rest of the family had to offer some form of retribution for Mom's only daughter's return. Their plea and coercive sin got the Khmer Rouge guerrillas to give and return my adolescent sister back to the loving, warm bosom of my mother and her immediate family then. I'm sure that the Khmer Rouge gave her back because they were dismantling and returning to where they came from. Besides giving back my older sister, they also offer the rest of the kids that were also there, captives and in their custody in that area. Not one to stick around in a dangerous area, uncle, mother, and the rest of the family agreed to whatever they were offering them. My mother, her kin, sister, and I, the rest of the family, and the handful of malnourished orphan children ran off like scared dogs before the horrific men could have time to change their sinister minds. While running, we luckily met up with other families and adults that were also running from the current atrocity. Few children were reunited with their parents or significant others, and the rest went along with whomever would take them. And the many children who had no one to be with, well, they struggle on their own, onward, searching for the same freedom we all aspire to reach, the freedom that seemed to be steps ahead as we ran on. but at the very least, we were a family once again. And being a family is our stronghold. Parents, mothers and father, sons and daughters, sisters and brothers, all together seeking the same freedom. We all ran off on our separate ways, family with their children, and children amongst themselves, all being mindful of the varied terrains and landscape that this horrendous war-stricken country had to offer. Our immediate family continued on and made our way toward the nearby country of Thailand, which was our destination for now. This is the end of Chapter 3 of Engagement in Peril. Be on the lookout for Chapter 4, titled Thailand Breach and Reach. Thank you for listening. Until next time, this is Do, Ra, Mi, and I'll see you later. Thank you.